What's up everybody, it's James here, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be dissecting a video from a fellow YouTuber named Gutierrez. You may have heard of him. And I just wanted to address a video that he put together recently talking about how Airbnb is, in his opinion, going to cause the 2020 recession. And so I want to dissect from the standpoint of an Airbnb expert. For anyone that doesn't know me, who's not familiar, who's new to the channel here, well, number one, please smash the like button. This video took a lot of time to really just kind of dig up and put together. And it really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. If you want to stay in touch with the channel, then please consider subscribing. I do really appreciate that. But for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm the co-author of Airbnb for Dummies. I'm an Airbnb expert. I've been hosting and running hosting related businesses for several years now. And so I wanted to give my take on whether or not Ricky is right and whether or not Airbnb is going to cause the 2020 recession. So to start off with, Ricky, I think that there's a couple of flaws in your video. I think that it was pretty quickly put together with not a lot of thought or not a lot of research. To start off with, Jessica, who you talk about throughout your video, her name's actually Selene.
Some people have multiple hosts, and let's take Jessica as an example. Jessica has over 12 Airbnb listings and people are getting desperate.
Jessica, Selene, who you referenced in your video, Selene has, when you're saying is 12 listings, when I looked Selene's listing up, Selene actually only has 10 listings. I'm going to touch on why that is in a second here as well. But that's one of the hosts that you say is a super host who's super screwed. Funny tagline there. And let's really dive into that. Like, is Selene, who's got multiple different listings, obviously, is she super screwed going into the recession here? Well, if we look at it, if we actually look at Selene's listings, we look at them, then her listing that you're talking about, there being a listing that has 12 people that it can house and is listed for $95, that's actually not Selene's listing.
Check this out, it can fit over 12 guests and it's only $95 a night.
You did something kind of tricky there where you talked about Selene or you talked about Jessica and then you flipped it over to another guy, Bradley, whose listing that was, and his listing is one of two listings that he has, and he's actually got that one down to $95. So let's talk about that later. Selene's listings, on the other hand, she's got a number of them. Right now, at the time of filming this, she has 10, and none of them are listed for as low as $95. So listed for about $300 to $400 a night. And if you do some more digging and you really look into it and you look at those different listings, of those 10 listings that are currently available, there's 4 of them that are actually completely booked for the next several months. Now, that's a good indication that Selene probably was proactive here, and Selene probably went and put longer term tenants into our listings. That's something that I know that we're doing with a lot of our students, that we're doing with our listings, is putting longer term guests into those listings so that they have a place that they're filled up and the rent is paid for several months now. Now, a lot of people are going to be doing that to get more space for their family during this whole shutdown, to have a better home office set up, those sorts of things. And then obviously just housing first responders is a really good option as well. But short-term rentals are largely dead, but Selene's done a good job there, and it looks like 4, and that's likely the reason that 2 of her listings are now taken down out of those 12 that originally were shown in your video, is because they likely have been filled up with longer-term tenants. Now, the 6 that remain, like I mentioned, those ones are still accepting some bookings here and there. They've actually got some decently filled up calendars. I would assume that Selene is either filling those up or figured out something there. And the remaining nights, it doesn't look like Selene's too worried about filling up, because she's actually got the prices listed at between $300 and $400 a night. And you'll see those are some nice properties. They're relatively high end. And so that's pretty in line with where our prices should be. Quite frankly, as an Airbnb host and as an Airbnb expert, if she really wants to fill those up, given the current climate, I would actually suggest dropping the pricing down more. But I don't know her financial situation, and what I would assume is that Selene probably has enough money already booked for the month that she doesn't really have to worry about filling up those extra months. That's one of the nice things about having a property that can perform a lot better and be getting $300 to $400 a night, is that if you have some of those bookings in there, if you have someone staying there for 2 weeks, your cost of your mortgage is likely to be covered, and so you're not really stressing that much. Now, another thing that's worth noting is that Selene doesn't necessarily own all 12 of those listings or all 10 of those listings. It's quite likely, in fact, that Selene actually manages a number of those listings for other people. And to your point of Selene being this person who has gone and borrowed from the banks based on the projections for short-term rental and is way over leveraged, That's a lot easier said than done. The reality is that most banks don't lend on short-term rental income because it's far too unstable for them to lend based off of. So they're likely not going to give Selene a loan for a house that she can only afford because of the short-term rental income. I'm not saying that no one does that, because obviously there's secondary lending, there's different ways of getting the money to buy a property, but most major banks are not going to lend based on that income. So I don't necessarily think that it's true that a whole bunch of people, most of the 500,000 hosts or 600,000 hosts in the US are going and getting these properties by over leveraging themselves. Now, before touching on that and digging into that a little bit deeper, I want to dissect another part of your video, which was Bradley's listing, who you conveniently kind of slid in with Jessica's or Selene's there, and mentioned as a listing that could sleep 12 people, but was listed at $95 a night. Bradley's listing, if you actually look at his profile, is one of 2 listings that he has. And if you look at the listing deeper, there's a couple clues that would tell you that it's quite likely that that listing is actually Bradley's primary residence. If you look at the pictures, you'll see that there's some personal items in a lot of the spaces that would indicate it's probably a space that he lives in, not just an investment property. And if you look at the calendar, you can also see that a number of the dates are blocked off, and there's only a few different little scattered availabilities throughout the next several months here that you'll see in the calendar, which indicates that it's quite likely that Bradley just rents out that place when he's not occupying it. Maybe he's visiting a family member, maybe he is traveling, maybe he goes and stays with a girlfriend, whatever it might be. There's tons of different setups that would make this make sense. And Bradley's listing is therefore probably not really reliant on the income. So having that additional supplemental income, it's probably not that big of a deal if Bradley loses that for a little bit. Now, obviously that will hurt people more to be losing supplemental income when, like you mentioned in your video, millions of Americans are losing their primary source of income, their job. But that's not to say that Airbnb is necessarily going to be what causes a recession. It just means that not having supplemental income hurts people when they don't have primary income. But if Airbnb were to not exist, those people wouldn't have that supplemental income in the first place. And so, when you really think about it, they'd be a lot worse off in the first place. Now, the question then becomes, well, how many of these hosts actually are using Airbnb for supplemental income? And my company, LearnBnB, actually did one of the most comprehensive studies of Airbnb hosts ever a couple years back. And after surveying over 250,000 Airbnb hosts, found that 80% of all hosts on Airbnb list only one property, and that in most cases, that's their primary or a secondary residence of theirs. So the picture that you're painting of there being 660,000 Airbnb hosts in the US who are all just over leveraging themselves and running a business out of this and are just totally screwed and going into foreclosure is not really necessarily an accurate picture. Out of those 600,000 hosts, the large majority of those listings are actually someone's primary or secondary residence, not someone's going and over leveraging themselves. So those super hosts aren't actually necessarily super screwed, and most signs would actually point to that they're not. So sorry for kind of dragging that through the mud and kind of dissecting a lot of that in a way that doesn't really line up with the way that you had originally looked at it. But that's not all to say that Airbnb hosts aren't screwed and that all Airbnb hosts are going to be in the clear. That's not true to say either. Now, the reality is there are a number of Airbnb hosts that are going to likely be put into foreclosure because of what's going on and that are going to have some tough times. Now, those hosts typically fall under 2 categories. There's 2 categories that I would say are actually super screwed. Now, the one category, which is very, very far from your estimate of a majority of those 600,000 Airbnb hosts, as you kind of implied in your video, is the people that are going and finding secondary lenders or other kind of sketchy ways of getting their hands on money that are a lot less sturdy, and they're going and doing that based on their projected short-term rental income. And so they are over leveraging themselves. Now they own a property that doesn't make sense to have on long-term rental. It only makes sense if they're getting the inflated returns from Airbnb. And so now that that's no longer possible, those people are not going to be able to make their monthly payments. Those people are going to be quite screwed. The other group of people is going to be people that are doing what's called rental arbitrage. In my opinion, what I'm seeing right now is that a lot of people doing rental arbitrage, which is basically where you rent a property on a fixed monthly rate with a long-term lease that allows for subletting, and then you flip that property for a profit onto Airbnb. Those people are going to be left with little to no income, extremely high monthly overhead, and no assets to their name to protect themselves. Because again, they don't actually own the property, they're just renting it. And so those people are the ones that are likely more than anyone to be super screwed. And those hosts unfortunately don't own the properties, but that actually also ties into why this actually isn't going to contribute that much to the recession, because the property owners in that situation are going to be able to find another long-term tenant. Now, granted, rental rates are going to be lower because right now rental rates are decreasing everywhere and there's a lot less people moving, there's a lot less demand for housing, and so it's likely that property is going to sit empty for a little bit, and some of those properties likely will go into foreclosure because some people don't have the security finances set aside to be able to hold a property for several months without having a tenant in there. However, that's also happening to landlords all over the world whose tenants who are unemployed can't afford to pay the rent. And so whether your tenant was someone that was doing Airbnb or a tenant who is now unemployed, there's still gonna be a lot of landlords that are facing a dry up in their rent right now, and so they're not gonna be able to carry that property any longer. And so that's gonna cause issues. But for the Airbnb impact of it, really those people are doing rental arbitrage, they're running a business. And when you think about it, the people that are going and over leveraging themselves and investing and really actively going and building their portfolio and doing secondary lending or raising money privately and going and building an Airbnb portfolio, both of those categories of people, those and the rental arbitragers, are both running a business. That's not representative of the majority of the Airbnb hosting community, which, like I said, is people that are using their primary home or their secondary home to generate some supplemental income. Now, the people that are running businesses out of it, those are the people that are going to be in a tighter place because they're, a lot of them, taking on higher amounts of risk. And that's a larger amount of the much smaller community of Airbnb hosts, a small section of those Airbnb hosts that are actually running a business. And those are the people that are going to be challenged financially. And so to your original point, the whole video was kind of trying to get across of, is Airbnb going to cause the next 2020 recession? Well, no, it doesn't look like it. But the whole worldwide shutdown that's happening is going to cause businesses to close, Airbnb businesses and otherwise. And so, yeah, it does look like that whole worldwide shutdown might have a decent chance and is looking like it is causing a 2020 recession. But to say that that's on the backs of Airbnb is a bit of a stretch in my opinion. Now, that's just my thoughts, and obviously, to be honest, this is kind of more my domain. And this is, you putting together a video about Airbnb was kind of as crazy as me putting together a video on stock markets, which I've done on this channel. So I get it. I didn't really, for me, it was more just my opinion when I was doing that and my thoughts on it and talking about different ideas that I had about different opportunities that I saw in the market. So, definitely appreciate it. Definitely appreciate you putting together the video. I've been a subscriber to your channel for a while and I follow it and I generally enjoy the content, but I did want to put this video together to just kind of clear up what I saw as being some gross inaccuracies in that video. So for anyone who's still stuck around, please take a second to just like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you want to get more Airbnb hosting related content. That's the majority of the hosting content or the content that I put together on this channel. Like I said, I try to stick with my wheelhouse as much as possible. And so that's sort of what I got for you today. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a thumbs up. And if you have any thoughts, then leave a comment. Any questions, leave a comment for me. I look forward to it and I'll see you on the next video.